There's something most people don't realize about the things they keep around them. Objects are not just lifeless things. They hold energy, they carry history, and they can be connected to forces beyond what the eye can see. Some of you may have items in your homes, sitting on shelves, tucked away in drawers, hanging on walls, and you don't even realize the influence they have over your life. You see, in the spiritual realm, nothing is neutral. Everything is either drawing you closer to the light or pulling you deeper into darkness. People think that demons only come through direct invitations, through rituals, through calling out to them, through deep involvement in the occult. But that's not always the case. The enemy is subtle, he is cunning, and he will look for any open door. And sometimes that open door is an object you've allowed into your life without a second thought. You may think it's just decoration or it's just a souvenir, but let me tell you, not everything that looks innocent is harmless. There are cultures around the world where people dedicate objects to spirits, to deities, to forces they believe will bring them power, luck, or prosperity. But those objects are not just wood, stone, or fabric. They have been prayed over, they have been sacrificed to, and they carry a presence with them. When you bring something like that into your home, you are inviting the very spirit attached to it. Some people start experiencing strange disturbances, sleepless nights, unexplained depression, a heavy atmosphere in their home, and they don't know why. But when you trace it back, you often find that something changed when they brought a particular object into their space. It's not just carved idols or artifacts from distant lands. Sometimes it's something as simple as a book, a symbol on a piece of jewelry, or even a movie that glorifies the demonic. When you open yourself up to things that celebrate darkness, that promote the supernatural outside of God's covering, you are giving permission for those spirits to take residence. And let me tell you, demons don't need much space. They don't need a grand invitation. They just need an opportunity. Many times people underestimate the power of symbols. There are certain shapes, markings, and designs that have been used for centuries in occult practices. They may be printed on clothing, on posters, on everyday household items. But those symbols are not meaningless. They have significance in the spiritual world. The enemy knows what they represent, even if you don't. And the moment you align yourself with those symbols, even unknowingly, you are stepping into agreement with what they stand for. Now you might be wondering, but if I don't believe in that stuff, how can it affect me? Let me ask you something. If someone hands you a glass of poison and you drink it, does it matter whether or not you believe it's poison? It's still going to affect you. That's how the spiritual realm works. Ignorance does not equal immunity. Some of you have been battling heaviness in your life, struggling with thoughts of fear, anxiety, depression. Some of you have felt like no matter how hard you pray, there is a resistance, like something is blocking your breakthrough. And what if I told you that part of the reason could be what's in your own home? I have seen people who, after removing certain objects from their house, suddenly felt a shift. They slept peacefully for the first time in years. The nightmares stopped, the tension lifted, the confusion disappeared. That is not coincidence. That is spiritual reality. You have to understand, demons don't just roam aimlessly. They look for places where they are welcomed, where there is access. And if you are holding on to something that was dedicated to darkness, whether you realize it or not, you are creating an entry point. That is why discernment is critical. That is why you cannot afford to be careless about what you allow into your home, what you entertain, what you surround yourself with. Because whether you recognize it or not, the spiritual world is real, and what you possess can connect you to it in ways you never intended. Some of you might feel a conviction rising up right now. You're thinking about something you've held on to for years, something that just never sat right with you. Maybe it was given to you as a gift. Maybe you bought it because it looked interesting. But deep down, you've always sensed there was something off about it. Don't ignore that feeling. The Holy Spirit warns us, nudges us, tries to bring things to our attention, but too often we dismiss it. But today, you don't have to dismiss it. You don't have to keep living with things that were never meant to be in your life. You don't have to give darkness even the smallest foothold. You have the authority to remove whatever is not of God from your home, from your life, from your mind. And let me tell you something, when you do, you will feel the difference. You will experience the peace that was missing. The weight that's been pressing down on you will lift. Because the moment you close the door to darkness, the moment you take back that authority, the enemy has to leave. So tonight when you go home, take a look around. Ask God to show you if there's anything in your space that shouldn't be there. And when he does, don't hesitate, remove it. Because nothing, no object, no possession, no earthly thing is worth giving the enemy access to your life. There are things in this world that have more than just physical significance. They carry a spiritual weight, an unseen influence, and many people don't realize it, but the things they bring into their homes, the things they keep in their possession, can become a gateway for something much darker than they ever intended. You see, the devil doesn't always knock on the front door. He doesn't always announce himself with flashing lights and loud noises. Sometimes he enters quietly through the things we allow, the things we accept without questioning. And one of the most common ways he does this is through objects marked with occult symbols and cursed artifacts. Now, some people might say, well, it's just a design. It doesn't mean anything. But let me ask you, if someone wears a uniform, does it not represent something? If a flag is raised, does it not stand for something greater? Symbols are never meaningless. In the occult world, symbols are used to invoke power, to send messages, to mark territory, and whether or not you believe in their meaning doesn't change the fact that they have one. It doesn't change the fact that in the spiritual realm, those symbols are recognized and respected by forces you do not want operating in your life. There are symbols that have been used in witchcraft, in satanic rituals, in demonic worship for centuries. Some are so well disguised that they've been incorporated into fashion, into art, into everyday household items. People hang them on their walls, wear them as jewelry, and don't even realize they align themselves with something dangerous. And let me tell you something. When you wear, display, or keep something that has been used for evil, it's not just decoration, it's a spiritual agreement. It's an invitation. And then there are cursed artifacts. Objects that have been involved in rituals dedicated to spirits, used in dark practices. Some people collect these things thinking they are antiques, rare finds, valuable historical pieces. But let me tell you, there is nothing valuable about bringing something cursed into your life. Some of these objects have been used in ceremonies where spirits were summoned, where blood was spilled, where demonic forces were given legal rights. You cannot take something that was used in darkness and expect it to sit idly in your home without consequence. I have seen people who struggle for years with oppression, with unexplainable heaviness, with strange disturbances in their homes. They prayed, they fasted, they sought help, and nothing changed. And then one day they discovered they had something in their house. Maybe it was a figurine, a piece of jewelry, a book that had been connected to the occult. And when they got rid of it, when they removed that object from their lives, the atmosphere shifted, the oppression lifted, the disturbances stopped. That is not coincidence. That is the power of spiritual law. You see, demons are legalists. They operate on access points, on agreements, on permissions. And when you have something in your possession that has been dedicated to darkness, you are unknowingly giving them a foothold. You are allowing a presence that should have never been there, and it doesn't matter whether you knew or not. Because in the spiritual realm, ignorance does not protect you. That's why God warns us over and over again to stay away from idols, from witchcraft, from anything connected to the powers of darkness. Because He knows what we often forget, what we allow, what we tolerate, will eventually take root. Some people have been battling things they can't explain, fear, torment, tension in their home, and they've tried everything but haven't thought to look at what's around them. Maybe you have something that was passed down, something that was gifted to you, something you picked up along the way that just doesn't sit right in your spirit. Listen to that warning. If something in your home carries a darkness you can't quite explain, don't hold on to it out of sentimentality. Don't keep something just because it's expensive, or because you think it's just art, or because you don't want to offend someone. If it's an open door to the enemy, no amount of money, no sentimental value, no reason is worth keeping it. Some of you need to go home and do a cleansing. You need to take a look at what you've been holding on to. Ask God to reveal anything that is not of Him, anything that carries a presence that should not be in your life. And when He does, don't hesitate. Don't rationalize. Remove it. Break the connection. Because the moment you do, you will feel the difference. The atmosphere will shift. The darkness will lose its grip. And you will finally walk in the freedom God intended for you. There's something happening in our world today that most people don't even think about. It's not hidden. It's out in the open. It's in our movies, in our music, in the books we read, in the shows we binge watch late at night. It's entertainment, they say. Just fun, just fiction. But what if I told you that what you're letting into your mind and your home through these things isn't just harmless entertainment? What if I told you that the enemy has found one of his greatest tools through the very things people willingly consume every single day? You see, the devil doesn't need you to bow at an altar, chant incantations, or perform rituals to gain a foothold in your life. All he needs is for you to lower your guard. All he needs is for you to accept things you once would have rejected, to become numb to what is evil, to laugh at what should make you weep. And that's exactly what's happening. Turn on the TV, go to the movies, listen to the top songs on the charts. What do you see? Dark themes, witchcraft, possession, demonic imagery, a glorification of the very things that God warns us to stay away from. And the worst part, most people don't even recognize it anymore. They call it entertainment. But let me tell you something. Hell is entertained by what's happening. Because the more we consume these things, the more we normalize them. The more we normalize them, the more we open the door for them to take root in our lives. Some of you have been struggling with fear, with anxiety, with intrusive thoughts. Some of you have felt a weight, a darkness, an uneasiness in your home, and you wonder why. But let me ask you, what are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you filling your mind with every single day? The Bible says that the eye is the lamp of the body. What you let in through your eyes, through your ears, affects your spirit. And yet people sit for hours watching movies about demonic possession, horror films that glorify terror, shows that make witchcraft look exciting and fun. Do you really think you can fill your mind with darkness and not be affected by it? Do you really think you can listen to music filled with rage, rebellion, and filth and not have it shape your spirit? That's not how it works. What you consume, you become. What you meditate on, you give power to. And let's talk about how deep this really goes. There are artists, filmmakers, writers, people who have openly admitted to being inspired by dark forces when creating their work. They say spirits guided them, that something took over as they wrote their lyrics, as they crafted their stories. And people take these things into their homes, let their children watch them, let these messages play on repeat in their ears. And then they wonder why they feel a shift in their atmosphere, why their kids are having nightmares, why their thoughts are filled with things that don't belong there. There are no coincidences in the spiritual realm. There is no such thing as just a song or just a movie when the content is saturated with demonic influence. And let me tell you, the enemy is strategic. He knows that if he can't get you to participate in darkness outright, he can at least get you to enjoy watching it. He can get you to be entertained by it, to laugh at it, to downplay it. And once that happens, the door is cracked open. But it's just fantasy, right? Just fiction. That's what they want you to think. That's how they get you comfortable. That's how they get you to let your guard down. But the moment you start accepting darkness as normal, the moment you stop feeling convicted about what you're consuming, the enemy has already won half the battle. Because desensitization is the first step to acceptance, and once you accept something, you stop resisting it. Some of you need to take inventory of what you've been allowing into your life. You need to ask yourself, is this drawing me closer to God, or is it pulling me away? Is this filling my mind with truth, or is it feeding me lies? Because what you consume will shape the atmosphere of your life. You can't surround yourself with darkness and expect to walk in light. If you've been battling thoughts that won't leave, if you've been feeling a heaviness that you can't explain, if you've been struggling in ways you never did before, take a hard look at what you're letting in. Because sometimes the enemy doesn't need to attack you directly. He just needs you to open the door. There are things people carry with them, things they wear, things they keep close, thinking they bring luck, protection. Or some kind of spiritual benefit. But what if I told you that some of those very objects, the ones people cling to the most, are the very things holding them in bondage? What if I told you that talismans, charms, crystals, and ritualistic items aren't just harmless trinkets, but tools the enemy uses to keep a grip on people's lives? You see, the world has a way of disguising darkness as light. It takes something dangerous, something rooted in deception, and repackages it as something beautiful, something mystical, something that seems to bring power or peace. People wear amulets, believing they will ward off evil. They keep crystals, thinking they will bring healing. They hang dream catchers over their beds, never questioning where these things come from or what spirits they were originally meant to invoke. But the truth is, there is no power in a rock, no safety in a charm, no peace in an object. All power comes from one source, and that is God alone. But the enemy wants people to believe otherwise. He wants them to put their trust in things instead of in the Creator. He wants them to hold on to objects, thinking they bring safety, thinking they bring success, thinking they bring energy, when all they're really doing is opening doors to the very spirits they're trying to keep out. Because here's what the world doesn't tell you. Many of these objects have been used for centuries in rituals, in spells, in occult practices designed to call on forces that do not belong in your life. And when you take those things into your home, when you wear them, when you put your faith in them, you are aligning yourself with the spirits attached to them. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in it. It doesn't matter if you only bought it because it looked nice, or because someone told you it had positive energy. In the spiritual realm, intention doesn't change reality. If something was created as a tool for witchcraft, for New Age practices, for divination, then it carries that purpose with it. You can't separate an object from its original design. And the more you engage with these things, the more they weave their way into your life, making it harder for you to hear from God, harder for you to walk in freedom, harder for you to break free from the battles you never even realized were spiritual in nature. Some people keep tarot cards, pendulums, sage bundles, not realizing they are participating in practices God has warned us about from the very beginning. Some say, well, I don't actually believe in it. I just think it's interesting. Or it's just for decoration. But tell me, would you display a book of curses in your home just because it had a nice cover? Would you keep a bottle of poison on your nightstand just because the color was pretty? No, you wouldn't. Because deep down, you know that what something represents matters. You know that some things, no matter how harmless they look, bring destruction with them. And yet, how many people keep objects in their homes, in their pockets, around their necks, believing they are bringing them good fortune, when all they are doing is allowing the enemy to have a foothold? You can't hold on to something that was designed for darkness and expect it to bring you light. You can't rely on man-made objects to protect you and expect to walk in the power of God. Some of you have been experiencing oppression, heaviness, confusion. Some of you have felt an unshakable anxiety, a fear that lingers, a tension in your home that you can't explain. And I'm telling you right now, look at what you've been holding on to. Look at the things you've placed your trust in. If you are carrying charms, amulets, crystals, if you are keeping objects that were used in spiritual practices outside of God, You are allowing something into your life that was never meant to be there. God does not work through trinkets and lucky charms. He does not need objects to protect you, to guide you, to bless you. But the enemy will use whatever he can to distract you, to deceive you, to get you to put your faith in anything but God himself. And the moment you do, you have unknowingly given him room to work. Some of you need to go home and cleanse your house. You need to throw out the things that have been keeping you bound, the things that have been allowing a presence in your life that should not be there. And when you do, you will feel the shift, the weight will lift, the confusion will clear, because when you remove the enemy's tools, you remove his access. And when you remove his access, he has no choice but to leave. There's something happening in homes, in families, in the lives of so many people, and they don't even realize the cause. They feel the weight of it. They sense the tension, the uneasiness, the division that wasn't there before. Some have noticed their peace slipping away, their joy being replaced by heaviness, their minds filled with thoughts they never used to entertain. And the whole time, they're looking for the reason, searching for answers, never realizing that the very things they've brought into their homes, the very things they've held on to, are what's been working against them all along. There are objects in people's homes right now, things they've had for years, things they've inherited, things they've received as gifts, that are carrying a presence that should not be there. Some are tied to false religions, to idolatry, to spirits that oppose everything of God. Some were used in ceremonies, in rituals, in practices that open doors to the demonic. And some, at first glance, seem harmless, just a souvenir, just a piece of art, just a decorative item. But what people don't understand is that when something has been dedicated to another God, another spirit, another power, it carries that influence with it. And let me tell you something. The enemy is not concerned with whether or not you recognize what's happening. He is not waiting for your permission to operate. If something in your home was used as an object of worship to another God, to another power, then it was already given over spiritually. And when you bring it into your home, even unknowingly, you bring everything attached to it with you. Some of you have things in your house right now that have been working against you. You have idols, statues, masks, artifacts from other religions, thinking they're just cultural pieces, thinking they're just decorations. But let me ask you, would you take something that was used in a satanic ritual and put it in your home? Would you display something that was used in a sacrifice to another god? Of course not. Because deep down you know that what something represents matters. You know that an object isn't just an object when it has been dedicated to something spiritual. People wonder why they feel a heaviness in their home. They wonder why they can't seem to break free from fear, from torment, from oppression. And they don't realize that the enemy is holding on to a right they gave him when they allowed those things to stay. You cannot fill your home with things tied to darkness and expect to live in peace. You cannot hold on to objects that were created to honor another spirit and expect the presence of God to rest in your home. And some will say, well, I don't worship it, I don't believe in it, it's just there. But let me tell you, the spiritual realm does not operate based on what you believe. It operates on what has been dedicated, on what has been given legal ground. And if something was made for the purpose of honoring another God, then it carries that purpose with it, whether you acknowledge it or not. Think about how many times in Scripture God warned his people to tear down the idols, to destroy anything associated with false gods. He didn't say keep them as decorations. He didn't say hold on to them because they have sentimental value. He said get rid of them, because he knows what we so often forget. These things are not neutral. They bring a presence with them. They create an open door for the enemy to operate. Some of you have been struggling, battling things you can't explain, dealing with turmoil in your home that you can't seem to get under control. And I'm telling you right now, look at what you've allowed in. Look at what you've been holding on to. If there is anything in your home that has been tied to another God, to another spirit, to another form of worship, it needs to go. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. It doesn't matter how much history it has. It doesn't matter if it was a gift from someone you love. If it is tied to darkness, it does not belong in your life. And let me tell you what happens when you remove these things. The atmosphere shifts. The heaviness lifts. The oppression breaks. Because the enemy can only stay where he has been given a place. And the moment you remove his access, he loses his hold. Some of you need to go home today and take a hard look at what you've been allowing to stay. Because when you remove what does not belong, you make room for the presence of God to fill your home, to fill your heart, to fill your life with peace like you've never known before. There is a battle happening right now, a war that most people don't even see. It's not being fought with weapons or armies. It's not happening on a battlefield with soldiers. It's happening in homes, in minds, in hearts, and the enemy is using every tool at his disposal to gain a foothold. He doesn't need to show up in a terrifying way to take control of a life. He just needs an open door. He just needs an invitation, a small compromise, a little room to move. And the truth is, many people are giving him exactly that without even realizing it. It happens through the words spoken, the thoughts entertained, the habits repeated day after day. It happens through bitterness that is never dealt with, through anger that is allowed to fester, through unforgiveness that hardens the heart, because the enemy knows something that many people don't. Whatever is not surrendered to God can be used against you. And if you allow sin to remain in your life, if you hold on to things that should have been given to God long ago, then the enemy will take full advantage of it. Some people have allowed things into their lives that they know shouldn't be there. They've excused behaviors, justified actions, convinced themselves that certain sins aren't really that bad. But let me tell you something, what you allow to stay will eventually take root. And once something takes root, it begins to grow, it begins to shape the way you think, the way you act, the way you live. It begins to influence your decisions, your relationships, your future. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't happen all at once. The enemy is patient. He doesn't rush the process. He introduces something small, just a thought, just an idea, just a little compromise. He whispers, it's not a big deal. No one has to know. Just this once. And before you realize it, that one compromise has turned into a habit. That one moment of weakness has turned into a stronghold. And that stronghold becomes something that controls you instead of you controlling it. That's how the enemy works. He doesn't need you to reject God outright. He just needs you to let little things slide. He just needs you to get comfortable with sin. He just needs you to ignore conviction long enough for your heart to grow cold, because the moment you stop feeling convicted, the moment you stop caring about what is right and wrong, is the moment he knows he has won. But here's the truth. Sin is not something to play with. The things you allow into your life, the habits you refuse to break, the attitudes you hold on to, they have consequences. Some people are struggling right now wondering why they feel distant from God, why they can't seem to find peace, why their prayers feel empty. And I'll tell you why. Because you can't walk in the fullness of God's presence while holding on to things that don't belong there. You can't expect to be free while keeping chains in your hands. Some of you have been battling thoughts you can't shake. You've been dealing with addictions that have gripped you for years. You've been carrying shame, guilt, and regret from things you wish you could undo. And the enemy keeps telling you that you'll never change, that you'll never break free, that this is just who you are now. But let me tell you, that is a lie straight from the pit of hell. Because as long as there is breath in your lungs, there is still time to turn around. As long as you are alive, you still have the power to shut the door on the enemy and break free from everything he has tried to use against you. But you have to make the choice. You have to be willing to let go of what is holding you back. You have to be willing to renounce the things that have kept you in bondage. You have to be willing to walk away from the sin that has entangled you, because the enemy has no power over what has been surrendered to God. The moment you lay it at his feet, the moment you truly repent, the moment you decide that you will no longer allow these things to have a place in your life, everything changes. Some of you need to do that today. You need to take inventory of your life. You need to ask yourself, what have I allowed to stay that should have been removed? What habits have I ignored that need to be broken? What doors have I left open for the enemy to walk through? And once you recognize it, don't delay. Don't wait another day, another hour. Cut it off. Remove it. Renounce it. Because the moment you do, the enemy loses his grip, the chains break, the heaviness lifts, and you step into the freedom that God has been waiting to give you all along.